how does it change when you're recruiting with a brand behind you versus newer and building that brand?
Leveraging my network was much more important here. Proactively kind of continuously recruit.
How do you find senior talent?
It's going to be all about networking.
Do you have a favorite interview question?
Describe your perfect boss. They're also giving you information to work with about creating the conditions for their success.
How do you make senior hires successful?
From day one, I'm going to be hands-on with that leader. The other thing is I do not believe in a 90-day plan. A senior leader is being hired because we need to change.
Welcome to How I Hire, the podcast where we talk with senior go-to-market leaders about how they find, vet, attract, and grow new talent. I'm Andy Mowat, founder of Whispered. Whispered believes in your next role will be posted, it'll be whispered. We love talking with great GTM execs about this. Today, I'm joined by Tolithia Kornweibel. Tolithia is the CEO of Beam Benefits. Prior to that, she was at Gusto for 7 years, where she was both CMO and CRO. Earlier in career, she was at Esurance and Analytics and CS. So if there's someone that knows every single aspect of go-to-market in the HR and InsurTech space, it's Tolithia. Tolithia, welcome. It's so great to have you.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, I am too. Well, we talked about that even just in the intro. You've seen all sides of go-to-market. What do you think the hardest of the four kind of go-to-market leadership roles, sales, marketing, CS, or RevOps, is the hardest to hire for in your mind?
I mean, I still believe that hiring a sales leader when you need to, which usually is because your results aren't where you want to be, is by far the most challenging to make it work. And it's as much about how the company is going to welcome that person in and support them and what it's going to take to transform revenue growth as it is about finding the right person.
I could agree more. I mean, sales is one of those, they always say if you hire a great sales leader, you need to see them make changes within one sales cycle. You had the luxury of going from CMO to CRO at Gusto. While we want to focus more on how you hire, I'd be fascinated to hear how that transition was, because you understood what the top of funnel was and you got to take over the sales side.
Yeah, well, the good news for me is in my entire marketing career, I was always serving inside sales as a major internal customer. So deep empathy and a lot of work to help make a sales funnel possible and not just to feed it. And so that really helped in the transition. And then, my marketing background has led me into all kinds of different responsibilities. And I tell people that I think it's been those opportunities have come to me because I always care first and foremost about customer value and how the company makes money. And if you get really wonky about both those things, there's not a lot of different areas of a company you can't make a positive impact on. So that had a lot to do with it. But there was obviously a pretty big steep learning curve. Sales organizations are big groups of humans, and making sure that they're feeling engaged, motivated, enabled, trained, confident, and ready. It's not for the faint of heart.
No, it's not. It's they tick a little differently than other functions for sure. Talk to me about the transition from a hiring perspective. You went from Gusto, large, everyone knows it who hires, to a smaller one where you're building the culture. There's a shift from being a C-level leader working for a CEO that sets the direction and the culture to somebody that's setting that yourself. And how has that transition been?
Well, it couldn't be more different. It is, at Gusto. So the good news is I started at Gusto. We only had about 300 employees, and we were much lesser well known at the time. And it was a very competitive hiring environment in the Bay Area in 2017. We worked really hard as a company overall, and it started with the founders, but we worked on our employer brand. We also were incredibly deliberate with how we hired, the hiring process itself, the candidate experience, the interview process, making sure that we were, careful about bias. We had a hiring committee responsible for final approvals of offers going out. Like, it's very, very deliberate and very, very heavy. And I think at one point we had something like 70 people in our talent acquisition team. And then you're right, by the end, sort of the employer brand was strong enough that there was a lot of inbound pull into the organization, which made it a little bit easier to feed a hiring funnel. But coming to Beam, so not only are we tiny by comparison with 220 employees, we don't have a talent acquisition function. And I'm okay with that by design. And we not only are less well known, but we've been through it. We went through, I think, the not uncommon insurtech roller coaster experience in 23, 24, and even into this year. And you can read about it online, what it was like for the folks at our company to go through that experience and, have some near-death experiences and stuff. And so, one of the things that we prioritize at Beam now is brutal honesty. Came in to be a transformative leader. When we go out and we're trying to recruit and hire, especially GTM professionals, we're upfront. We're like, have you read The Blind about us? Have you read Glassdoor? We're in a state of change. If that fires you up, let's talk more.
I've watched that happen at a company I interviewed with, which is the rumors on the prior leadership were tough. And I met the new CEO that had, similar to you, had come in from somewhere else. And it was just it was a breath of fresh air. It takes a little bit of time to change that. So first I remember the Gusto brand hire because I think I interviewed when I was really early, and I remember the no socks thing. I don't know if that's still a thing. But how you moved from a company that clearly has an amazing brand at Gusto to one that probably thinking less about the brand and the perception, but more just people haven't heard of Beam.
Yeah.
So, how do you recruit for those senior leaders or how does it change when you're recruiting with a brand behind you versus newer and building that brand?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I realized that leveraging my network was much more important here at Beam. So at Gusto, you could kind of announce that you were looking to add a leader to your organization, to the world, and the word would get out. But without a strong awareness out in market, it's been really important to leverage my network and to proactively kind of continuously recruit. So there's been lots of potential leaders that I've had conversations with since I came to, way in advance of our readiness to hire for the role. And just starting to create that awareness through a deep conversation about what we are trying to do, the impact we're trying to have, the challenges we're facing. So that's been a big piece of it. The other piece is Beam ourselves we sit at a funny intersection. We're not exactly an insurance carrier. We're not exactly an agency. We're not exactly a technology platform. And so when we are recruiting, giving a lot of really specific examples of the problems we're trying to solve, the responsibilities that a leader would have, how we're going to measure success, it can't wait too long. Because we can't just say, we're like this business, we're like Paychex, only great tech. There's not as much of a good example for it. So not only do we have to present our bona fides, but we have to be really specific and explanatory about what we're trying to accomplish.
A little bit. You said earlier on you don't have TA and it's conscious. Tell us why and how do you think about that?
Well, some of it is because we're small and resources are finite. But more than that, the reason I'm comfortable with that is because I love great recruiters, but I believe that they're a luxury that one should never depend on. Yeah. Sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not, sometimes they're great, sometimes they're not as great. But the reality is, if you're running a team, your responsibility never diminishes for always out there being a talent scout, or understanding the market, recruiting great, interviewing great, hiring great, and performance managing great.
I agree. Yeah, it's like I think a lot of people outsource talent acquisition to their recruiting team versus the best ones I've seen. I always try to do is like you build that with those people, and I think you're right. What are the prerequisites, do you think, before you start hiring senior leaders? Like exec alignment? What things do you think a company should have to make C-level and VP level people be successful within your org?
Yeah, I mean, definitely exec alignment to a point. I mean, you still have to hold the vision and hold yourself responsible for understanding what the company needs. But, there's a million negative stories of where, this surprise new exec enters into an executive team and is sort of rejected by the organism. So you definitely want to make sure that you're not creating conditions for that. I think you should be having a pretty continuous conversation with your leadership team about how we're set up. Not just in terms of like who are the players in the field, but how are we engaged with one another? Is it productive? Is it healthy? Do we have gaps? Are we sort of supporting one another? That's much easier to do in an organization like Beam, where I've got, small group of folks in my ELT. We've worked really hard on it in the last year, and it's been incredibly rewarding. The most gratifying thing about this job. And one of my leaders the other day said, it's effectively, who knows if we're going to be wildly successful, but I couldn't love working with this group of leaders anymore.
That is amazing. I love it. I was talking to another company and they were like, our leadership team is toxic. I have to get out of here. And it's like, if you don't have that, people start fighting their own battles rather than wearing their company at. And so I think that is so important. I also think the exec alignment to give clarity that next level down on the VP is so critical too. Okay, so if you don't have a TA function and you need a senior role, how do you do it? Do you go to recruiter? Do you have like a trusted recruiter or two? Do you go to your talent partners at the venture firms that you've worked with? Do you just do it with your network, or do you just post? Like, how do you find senior talent?
Yeah, a lot of it is network. So we do use external recruiters for very specific things. For example, not exec level per se, but we basically sell employee benefits. You got to be licensed to do that. We sell through brokers. They're a very specific community. So we have a very specialized recruiter working with us to hire experienced folks in those markets that can hit the ground running. So definitely targeted use cases like that. It's been a minute since I used an executive recruiting firm. That's actually been quite a while. And the last time I did was very successful. And I think it was because I knew them really well. And I knew them to be the hardest working and second best regarded shop, kind of that like challenger brand mentality. But I myself, my whole career, I have often just spent time being recruited by exec recruiting firms. So I get a sense proactively of who's, BS or actually really is connected. So I think that can be a useful tool. But quite honestly, it feels like the last few years, leadership recruiting has been almost all self-driven, at least in my experience, and effectively so. But a lot of it depends on the market conditions. If you're in an incredibly competitive market, there's still exec talent that expects professional recruiters to be the ones doing the outreach.
I like that. Yeah, you reach a certain point, probably like seed level, where it's almost weird if it's, well, I mean, I think for a couple of reasons, right? Like that talent team, no matter how good they are, doesn't have that network. So they're doing it from scratch and they're kind of like throwing things out there and they haven't vetted it. So I think there's an exec level that expects recruiting. That's really an interesting one.
Yeah. We definitely used one for our CFO hire. Mm-hmm. And we also do leverage our VC community for that. But then, for example, for chief technology that we needed, I knew exactly who I wanted. And she just happened to be available. So a lot of it is your network.
Is your role as CEO higher percentage recruiting, about the same as CRO? Does it become like even more so recruiting?
So it's higher percentage for all kind of like talent strategy and management. And some of that is because by design, I run HR too at Beam. But I think, we're not hiring 100 people every quarter. But if you include everything from setting the standard, the talent strategy, performance management, total rewards, doing much more of that work in this role than I did previously. In fact, I brought over one of my best talent partners from my last job into this company. So yeah, more of that. And then, also in the CEO role, a lot more of what you're doing is really just creating the conditions for your talent to thrive with each other, including when you're not there. And so I kind of think about some of that work as continuous recruiting or matchmaking or putting the puzzle pieces together of who the leadership team is and how they work with one another. And more and more these days, I've developed less tolerance for any sort of like drags in the team. And so sometimes we're doing proactive thinking, if not recruiting, for like, what should we have in a year from now?
I love that. It's neat to see how thoughtful you are about the culture. Having been a culture rep for 4 years and worked with all these companies that were just how important that stuff is. And then you have to set the right stage. That's neat. Okay, so how does you've obviously been hiring a lot of people, but how does talent find you? Right? Like, say, are there ways people have found effective to break down the door, get through to you? Are there specific candidates maybe that have stood out that you're like, well, I need to spend more time with this person?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the benefits of being old and being being female, quite honestly, in tech, has been kind of, you can develop a reputation as, a leader that people may want to consider working for because it kind of can, you're going to have a supportive structure, right? Like, so I get excited when people reach out to me because they know someone who worked with me. And they pretty much have open access. And it's gotten to the point where like there are some people in my network who will literally just give a person my phone number to text me. And like, that's how I know that I definitely need to talk to that person.
That's funny. It's kind of how I got to you. I was talking to Pat Wu
That's
here for you, and I'm like, hey, yeah, we had an amazing conversation about RevOps, and then I'm like, your CRO, she looks amazing. And he's like, let me make the introduction. So that's
yeah. If Pat gives you my number, then I'm going to talk to you for sure.
Thank you, Pat, for making the connection.
Yeah, definitely. And then, I wish I had more, I wish it wasn't so spammy in the world, especially with AI now, because it's really impossible to kind of like respond to inbound emails and LinkedIn invitations and things like that. So, if folks are trying to get access, whispered, yes. And it's going to be all about networking at the point.
I think that's right. We've kind of observed at the director and below, you're talking, most roles will be posted. But when you start to get into VP, I think it's like 80-20 on, and then you get to C-level. It's like, why would you ever post it? Because it's so nuanced, it's so different, and you want to be able to target. So it's, for good or for bad, I think the world's moving more, especially in this market too, where employers hold most of the cards.
I post leadership roles.
You do? Okay. Yeah.
The only reason I do it is to have a link to send somebody and that they can forward along and all of that without like worrying about Google Docs perms or anything like that. And that's really the only reason. I mean, you just can't, at this point, submitted applications, the tools aren't even up to being able to filter through them.
No, they're not. And you miss people, right? Like the people are sorting the AI and they're good. I mean, I did at Carta post 2 director level roles and found 2 people that I didn't know through my own network. And I think it's great at that director level, but you start to get into higher, it's really just going to be hard. It's relationships for sure. Okay, we were talking a little bit before we started just around how you interview, the process and some of the things, but I'd be fascinated, like you probably have built some ways you interview people and have like an interview process approach. Anything that you've built over time that works for you?
I like a very small panel.
Me too.
I mean, so I am, especially for the more higher level roles, there's going to be 2 decision makers and 4 people on the panel, probably call it. Now, by the time the interview is happening, I have probably talked to that leader 3 or 4 hours, maybe, hopefully in person, if at all possible. They've probably also had an exploratory conversation with one of my leaders within the organization. So we're really trying to get to know each other, but also trying to invalidate that this isn't an opportunity as quickly as possible, and kind of sifting through that before we're doing like old school interviews. And I tend to focus on a couple folks, super high level, the leader they're going to share the most goals with, somebody who's maybe closer to like a director level, but is sort of a culture keeper and a warrior for the cause, kind of independent of what reporting chain they're in. And then I always let those leaders ask to meet more people and get more access and more information. And that's always a positive indicator when somebody is like, hey, can I talk to a customer? Can I talk to your CFO? That can be a really great process. But even for director and other roles, like keeping the panel pretty tight.
You're preaching to me. I want to go to your ask when the leaders ask for more in a minute. But first, at bigger companies, I mean, I find that when panels start to bloat, it's a sign that the company's not fully aligned on something like that. How was Josh and the team around that? Like, because sometimes CEOs be like, "Oh, I want to insert this person. I want to insert this person." And were you able, even at a large company like Gusto, to keep panels tight?
Yeah, not all the time, to be honest. I think again, like the cultural commitment to building the company in a particular way included very specific things we were trying to do in the interview process. It was also, the kind of talent that we were trying to acquire often at Gusto was very, very in demand. And so, there's a reciprocal kind of pitch process happening there that you want to make sure is really rich, and you want to show up really great. But, Gusto, like a lot of tech companies, at least at the time that I was there, had a hiring committee. And that was, I'm not sure. I think jury's out for me on that structure. I understand a lot of the intentionality there. But, for a go-to-market pro and kind of an operator in a larger tech company that's very engineering and product driven, you have to go through a lot of extra education on what good looks like when you're sort of recommending specific hires. If your committee is further afield from, what to be highly likely to create success in your organization. So it's an extra tax, I would say. But it also has the benefit of executing against those very intentional and deliberate orientations that the company had about how they wanted to grow. We did have, in my opinion, I think I would say, and I would say it to Josh, is like so many people on the panel. I think he got there too, honestly. But yeah, there was a time when it did kind of expand a little bit too much.
I remember I lost one or two candidates at times when it's like the CEO would insert somebody else and stuff like that. What was the purpose of the hiring committee? Was it like the Amazon bar raiser type of thing? Was it only for senior level folks? It sounds like there were good parts and bad parts to it that it maybe expanded. But what was the positive purpose behind the hiring committee concept?
I think it evolved over time, but I think the fundamental premise was we want conviction in who we hire. So a big screen on that was if there were people who were on the fence, that was not considered appropriate. Like we used to say, if it's a soft yes, it's a no. Right? We wanted to make sure that we would make a hire, we'd welcome someone into the team that was, really at the top of their game and sort of undeniably the right person for us. And those are great intentions. Absolutely, no doubt. There's also values alignment that's really important in any culture, but in Gusto, it's prioritized significantly. So we're all going to be different, but we want to make sure that there's an alignment that we can get to with our core fundamental values. So I think that was also an intention of the committee to make sure that someone coming in was going to be additive to the culture and integrate really effectively. And that's a funny little story about that. Early days there, I was trying to hire a paid search manager and got denied by the hiring committee. because the person was too transactional and only mathematical. And I was like, well, that's exactly what I want. We got through it. It's all great. And he's like super successful now. He's like running his own big page.
You ended up hiring him at the end, right? Or...
Yeah, I did. We got through it. But it was, it was a moment.
Yeah, you're right. Those people need to basically be all about numbers. And like, I don't mean to like SEM type people. You often put in their, I don't mean it negatively, they're put in a corner and they got to like focus on their screen all the day. So they got to have. Do you have a favorite interview question?
The one that's been my favorite forever, for almost every level, it doesn't work great at C level, but is describe your perfect boss. Because if somebody gives you a person, a real human person that they worked for, then they're giving you a guiding description of how to make them most successful. They're probably also giving you a person you should know and look up to and learn from. If they describe kind of an archetype or what would be great for them, they're also giving you information to work with about creating the conditions for their success. And then, it also can sometimes elicit people showing you where they are on the spectrum of independence versus collaboration, right?
Yeah.
To use kind of positive words for that, but whenever somebody would say to me like, well, what I don't like is a micromanager, I'm pretty much not hiring that person. Like it would be very hard to come back from that.
And is that because you are a micromanager or because you don't want somebody that's negative in how they view the world?
I don't want someone who's resistant to collaboration, which is why I use that word. Like, I'm a very in the weeds manager, leader. And especially in a small company, we're 220 people. Nobody gets to fly at one altitude, right? Like everybody is having to change altitudes all the time. And so we can't be precious about our territories. I will prove it to my team that I'm there to help and unblock them, not to micromanage them. But that's different than me not wanting to roll up my sleeves and get down into the business and help you with it.
That is such an amazing answer on the micromanager concept. I actually had somebody that I remember one time, they hadn't been given feedback and I took over and they just couldn't deal with like collaborating on anything. And it was just so painful. But I think that's really well said. Yeah, definitely at the level you're playing at, you couldn't have ever gotten to where you are as a micromanager, but it's interesting to think that the thought behind that one. You said a couple minutes ago, you love when candidates ask for more info. I'm a big fan of that too, right? Like I remember when I got the offer at Carta, I was like, great, but I would love to meet the CEO and that wasn't on my list. And so I got a chance to meet him. And I'm a big fan of like, you can do that and you shouldn't just sit there and evaluate what the cards. Is there a time in the process when it's too early and too needy? Because I've sometimes given people the advice of, it's not what you need until you get to like that. You really are the final choice type of thing. Is there a point when it could be more of a red flag earlier for you?
Well, certainly. So it's impossible to know from outside what the dynamics of a leadership team and their board is, and their VCs, their investors, or board members. So I think you want to be careful about requesting access to the board. That is probably something you can like ask about, but gently and definitely down the road in the process. I'm very blessed because, and this was true at Augusta too, I've got a really incredibly supportive board, including, yes, our VCs, but then also I've got a couple independents that are very participatory in our hiring at the leadership level. So wouldn't have hired for technology lead without the involvement of my independent board member, Kimber, who's a former CTO of One Medical and just an incredible strategist. And on CFO hire, was blessed to have a CEO, CFO from insurance as another independent board member. And not only do they help with me vetting talent, they help close the sale, which is very good. And then they're there as mentors. So that's great. But you kind of have to let the CEO or the leader at the company kind of lead because only they know the dynamics there. Otherwise, I don't know that there's too early in the process. I think you want to be a little bit classy about it, but certainly after you've had, let's say, 3 or 4 conversations, I think you can approach it with whoever your main contact is, if it's a hiring manager or a TA person, and just say, hey, one question I'm really trying to puzzle through is, what's the financial stability of the company? What are the projections? What's the runway? What's the outlook, et cetera? Would there be an opportunity at some point for me to talk to somebody in the finance or FP&A organization so that I can get some additional information? I think that's totally good to do and totally above board. Maybe at least you've had 1 or 2 interviews before you do that.
I love that. There's a right way and a wrong way to handle that, timing wise and classiness. I like that. Because I have one question I keep forgetting to ask on other podcasts, but I at least want to ask it to you. I have a theory on this one, but I'm curious. If somebody pulls is there anything that gives you hesitancy on my candidacy? Is that a good tactic or a bad tactic in an interview process?
I don't know. It kind of feels icky to me. Like, it's so cheesy at this point.
Me.
I think, but I respect it. I respect where the candidate is coming from. I think what they're signaling is, I'm interested. And I want to make sure that I have given you all of the information that I have the opportunity to be seriously considered. Mm-hmm. The other read you could take on it, which is also super respectful, is I learn and grow from feedback. And I'm going to use every opportunity to kind of like get some of it in this process. But it feels like Sandler.
It does. It's like I'm running a playbook on you. Somebody told me I should ask this, so let me ask this to you.
Yeah. It feels like a Sandler sales methodology. No shade, maybe a little shade. But I think what so I would encourage folks, if either of those intentions is true, is like you want to make sure that you exhaust the opportunity to position yourself, or you want to receive feedback, is just think about your own authentic way to ask that question. And maybe even it can be an email. That's a classy move. I've had candidates do follow up with me, and just in an email, just said, hey, thanks for your time. Understand you went a different way. If now or later you've got any feedback for me, now that you know more about me and what my objectives are, I'd be really grateful for it.
I like it. We were talking before we started around the concept of like candidates we've turned down before. And you had that was like the first thing you were passionate about. I'd be fascinated to hear how you think about that.
Yeah. So I think I've developed a reputation for being very patient / tenacious / I hang on for a long time. There have been people who, have turned me down at a particular company, and then I've been successful hiring them at another company. There's a phenomenal leader, I don't know if I should out him, who turned me down at Gusto, went somewhere else, and then came back to me at Gusto. And that was phenomenal. And I think it was 2 things. It's my brutal honesty in the recruiting process is like, here's us, here's the challenges, here's the impact we're trying to have on the world. But I don't sell on upside. I sell on impact and challenge and accomplishment and collaboration. And because those things are authentically deliverable. And I think for this particular leader, the other place he chose to go to when he turned us down was had oversold. And so, the fact that we were much more transparent, kind of drove him right back into our arms, which is really great. And then also, and you said this about like you make friends in the interview process. A lot of times you meet incredible talent. It's just not the right 2x2 of the right person, right time, or right role. So it's like keep that relationship that you've developed, because it will down the road mean something to you. It could really turn into something important.
I agree. I think I coach candidates on that too, which is like, don't just treat it as a transaction. Let a little bit of yourself out. Maybe that's not what they're looking for, and that's okay, but they've got to know you as a person. And I've gotten to know some of my good friends have been people that I've turned down, they turned me down. And I've made great relationships with people that I've interviewed with that didn't get the job, right? I remember Eric, CEO at Zoom, he actually counseled me just out of the blue. He tried to hire me. He counseled me on whether I should take a role at a different company that he knew really well. And it was like, we've slightly stayed in touch, right? I wish I'd stayed in better,
Yeah.
but it's like, you can meet these amazing people, right? Like I've met them for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've helped folks that we had to part ways with find their next best gig. I've helped folks that were on my team, but maxed out find their next best gig. I think it's just sort of continuous recruiting and talent matching is just, it's a no lose proposition. And there's a lot of people that are working with me now that I first worked with 16 years ago. That really matters.
I always give the speech to people early when they're working with me. I kind of two speeches. One is take as much time as you need to leave your last employer. Because I hate the people that are like, you got to start tomorrow, because I expect you to do the same when you leave us. And then also, I give that same thing of like, I care about your whole career, not just here. And I want you to trust me enough that if it's not working, we're going to have that chat and we can give you, because it's I see so many execs that are scared to look for what their boss will find out. And there are bosses that that are vindictive or you don't want to tell that to, but ideally you have a relationship with your manager where you can have that dialogue openly.
Although, Annie, it feels like the world has shifted a little bit as of late as it relates to all of these things. I'm curious about, what you're seeing and how you're integrating kind of the news out there, right? We've had two significant downward restatements in annualized job creation in 2 consecutive years after no downwards adjustments anywhere close to that for 20 years. And, the news would tell you that, that's really in the menial task workforce and that knowledge workers, those jobs will continue to be created and stuff. But I sense amongst my team and amongst a lot of candidates out there, director level and below in particular, just complete anxiety. And a lot of folks kind of hanging on to where they are now and lacking confidence.
I've got a poll I want to do on psychological safety, which is an interesting one. I think my job is to give the team that works for me psychological safety. Like if you're not working, we're going to have that conversation. I learned that from Dan Levin at Box. He's like, you need to give people that feedback. And if it's working, I'm still going to push you. I'm still going to challenge you. So I would hope that anyone that works for me, unless I'm managing them out, has psychological safety. I remember, so I'd say about 40% of the people in Whispered looking for a role right now are still in roles, quietly looking. It's a stressful time, right? Because you can only take one process, you can do that. And so I do think there is a lot of, Jesus, I know the markets are hard. I shouldn't leave the role I'm in now because I could be out of work for an extended period of time. And then how does that perceive? So yeah, it's a tough market for sure is what I'm seeing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. Maybe as we wrap up, how do you make senior hires successful?
Oh, I saw this question in the prep and I got so excited about it. So as I mentioned, I'm sort of a multi-altitude flyer. I'm also a big nerd. And so I like to figure out things recently prompt engineering a website, and when I'm hiring a senior role, especially at a company as small as Beam, from day one, I'm going to be hands-on with that leader. I'm going to be in the trenches with you, somewhat to normalize the behavior so you're not shocked by it later. Because if you wait on that, then it feels like a swoop and poop manager kind of thing.
Oh, yeah. The let me give you your room to do your thing, but then here's how I actually am.
Yeah, and then I'm going to pull the rug out from under you. Yeah, so not do that. The other thing is I do not believe in a 90-day plan. I do not believe in any time to just listen and absorb and not make decisions and not take action. A senior leader is being hired because we need to change. We need to do things that we aren't doing or don't know how to do or we're doing half-assed. So you're there on day one to help us solve that problem. Your half-informed decision is probably better statistically than anything we were coming up with before. Don't be a jerk. But don't wait. Don't wait. And especially don't wait too long. And that was really reinforced for me coming into Beam. I was on board for 5 years, so I had like a little bit of a running start. Turns out being on a board and being in a company, two very different things. But the board hired me to come in full time because we had to make change and we had a limited amount of time to do it. And usually when a senior leader is being hired, there's some flavor of that going on. It's rare that it's, oh yeah, everything's going great and it's sort of easy and we're just optimizing slowly. And so, let's go spend money on an SVP.
I think we've all read that book, First 90 Days, at some point in our careers. And we've all been like, this is brilliant. But I agree with you. Like anyone that runs that playbook that feels like the grow at 10% era, right? Like It's not the grow at 90% or desire to grow faster or to fix things.
Yeah. And listen, I mean, not to be all buzzy about Gen AI, but at this point, there are not very many specialized topical areas that you can't get mildly dangerous at in a short period of time, at least in terms of the brilliant basics. Obviously, because of how those models are trained, they're not going to create invention for you. Like you still need to innovate. You still need to challenge and experiment, but like at least to fix problems, to get back on track, to implement brilliant basics. You can invalidate bad ideas very quickly using research tools out there, and find some ideas for improving things. And that's the other thing for me about senior roles and success is like, if you're not a person who's already started doing that, who is like hungry, voracious, sort of fearless in terms of new domain areas and even new technical skills that you yourself are developing, you're unlikely to create the conditions for your team to be that way too. And you're going to get moted out in this reality that we have going forward. So a big fan of prioritizing attitude and like just the voracious learning and experimenting aspect of a leader. Like a leader is not there to float.
I give this speech a lot to people. It's like, hey, well, how's AI going to change the world? I'm like, it'll be fine for most senior leaders, but if you don't have the mindset, I was talking to somebody the other day and I gave them a speech of, if you're not as a senior leader using AI, testing it, playing with it, and pushing its limits, you're going to get left behind.
Yeah. And you're underserving your team.
Yeah.
Because I guarantee that they're apprehensive themselves. And if you can create safety for them in their own experimentation, give them the simple guardrails, then it allows them to improve their own work life. And then they're not afraid of it. And they're not afraid of losing their jobs because of it.
And you also don't have those naive CEOs. They're like, just put some AI with it, it'll work, right? Like, I can't do that. This was amazing. I really loved the conversation. It's like I've learned a ton. I've got 4 pages of notes, and I deeply thank you for taking the time today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Andy. It was great to hang out with you.